There you go. It's working now.
Okay, let's do that again then. Hi, my name is Páraic Finnerty, and I'm the president of the Emily Dickinson International Society. I want to welcome everyone to today's online annual meeting for 2026. We had a wonderful in-person international conference in Taiwan, and we'll have an in-person annual meeting in Amherst in 2027. We wanted to create an online annual meeting this year to bring our international membership together to discuss the different ways Dickinson connects us. I want to thank Dan Mannheim and the annual meetings organization committee for all their work on these 3 days of papers, presentations, and performances. I want to also thank Wu Hong for co-organizing today's session with me. Today's part of the annual meeting is entitled Forever is Composed of Now's 21st Century Dickinson Scholarship. Today you will hear papers from a range of different Dickinson scholars, some of whom participated in last year's Emily Dickinson International Society Critical Institute. The Critical Institute, which usually takes place before an international conference, provides an opportunity for graduate students and early career scholars to workshop critical essays, chapters, or conference papers in small seminars with established Dickinson scholars. Today, you will hear papers from some of the postgraduate and early career scholars who helped organize last year's wonderful conference in Taiwan. Finally, you will hear papers from other Dickinson scholars who want to share their research with you. I want to thank those who donated to 2 Emily Dickinson International Society funding initiatives in 2024 and 2025 that enabled many of those who participated in last year's Critical Institute to travel to Taiwan. I want to thank Barbara Mossberg and the EDIS Fundraising Committee for organizing an auction in Amherst in 2024. I thank all those who donated to the auction and those who generously bid successfully for auction items. Other money to support the Critical Institute participants came from the James C. Fraser Conference Travel Fund for Emerging Scholars. It was set up last year to honor James Fraser, who died in 2025. He was a long-time member of the board. I would like to thank the Fraser family who helped us establish this fund, and also to all who donated to the fund. I want to dedicate today's session to James Fraser and his wife, Diana Fraser, who were beloved members of the Emily Dickinson International Society and its board. I'll now turn over to Wu Hong for a few words.
Okay, so thank you very much, Páraic. So I am Yu Hong, and I'm part of the board member of EDIS. And as Páraic just briefly mentioned, today's symposium is a continuation of EDIS amazing critical institute tradition. But in addition to that, because we have heard a lot of graduate students and early career researchers calling for more events together, and we've heard you guys. So that's why we want to put this amazing symposium and then as an opening of the 2026 annual meeting. And hopefully there can be more of this kind of events in the future for us to gather together. So if you have any interest, feel free to just reach out to us. And I'm very excited to all of your presentations. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Henry, and thank you to everybody. So, to perfect time, just 1 minute past 10 in the UK, which means it's probably 1 minute past 5 a.m. in the USA, and 1 minute past 5 p.m. in Taiwan. So I'm delighted to introduce our first panel, Transformations. We've got 4 different speakers, so I'm just going to read out their names and their titles. Their bios are all available in the program, so you can look them up there. So our first speaker is Irene Chan, and the title of her paper is Women Poets and Their Shakespeare, Case Studies on Emily Dickinson and Kaiserin Elisabeth von Österreich. Our second speaker is Hsin-Hsien, and the title of the paper is Emily Dickinson and the Poetics of Cleaning. The next speaker is Shruti, Sareen, and the title of the paper is Emily Dickinson Speaks to Neurodivergents. And our final speaker is Ting Wu, and the title of the paper is Thingness and Transformation, Absence, Loss, and Hope in Emily Dickinson's Poetry. So we'll start with Irene whenever you're ready. I'm really excited to hear your presentations and your papers.
Hello. Is my voice reaching out?
Yes, it is, Irene.
Okay, good. Hello. Hello again to Professor Finnerty, and hello again to my friends in Taiwan and new friends in England and America. I just finished my paper based on what I presented last year, and I revised a bit into the presentation today. So I understand that we have only like 10 to 15 minutes for the presentation. So please do stop me when I do get carried away. So may I share my screen? Okay. Let me see how to do that. Okay, there we go. Okay. And can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Irene.
Okay, lovely. So I'll get started. So my topic today, as Professor Finnerty has introduced, is women poets and their Shakespeare case study on Emily Dickinson and Kaiserin Elisabeth von Österreich, namely the Empress Elizabeth of Austria. So the case I will study today is A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, and the character I will focus is Titania rather than Hermia or Helena, who have been receiving rather more criticism and discussion. And Titania is a very special character for me, as well as the women poets I selected today. So I will begin with the review of the 19th century male criticism on Titania, because we know in 19th century women are generally not allowed into say professional academia field, and then I will proceed on the women poets' rewriting of Shakespeare's Titania, which will be Emily Dickinson's Titania and Kaiserin Elizabeth Titania. And then I will move on to the meaning of the rewriting and the criticism and the some sort of the empowerment from Shakespeare to these women poets. So Titania is the queen of the fairies, and I would call her, or I would say, I would define her as a underrated queen. The character is from A Midsummer Night's Dream and is usually seen as a doppelganger, which means the double to Queen Elizabeth I of England, who was the sovereign queen. Shakespeare often served as a playwright, and it and the origin of the name Titania is taken directly from Ovid's The Metamorphoses, and we have to bear in mind that I think it's Baines and some early 20th century scholars have notes that Shakespeare would have known the Metamorphoses in original Latin rather than the famous golden translation published in late 16th century, because the direct proof is that the name Titania is used by Ovid in the Metamorphoses rather like 3 or 4 times to refer to Diana, the moon goddess, or Luna, and the enchantress, very famous Circe or Circe, who is somehow back to her fame due to the recent film Odyssey. And then Titania also means the daughter or the daughters of Titan. And in the Golden translation, Titania, the name Titania is taken out. So we have to know that Shakespeare would obviously directly taken the name from Ovid's text, and he kind of transform this Titania into the parent and original. I'm quoting Shakespeare's text directly. Titania in A Midsummer Night's Dream is a Venus figure for erotic love, including birth and the creation of life. And then she's a maternal figure to the Indian boy, also called the changeling boy and the nature. But okay. As I have said, Titania is the queen, and she has a very strong sense of duty. We can see her sense of duty in her quarrel with Oberon. Titania reminds of Oberon that their marital disharmony has ruined the order of the nature. But Titania adheres on the principle of keeping the Indian boy from Oberon, and she refuses to reconcile based on this. And then she's also a maternal figure because of her protectiveness or possessiveness of the offspring, the Indian boy of her votaress. So we can also see that Titania is some sort of a goddess who has her own order, who including people who like worship or like pray to her. But later on, her love or her infatuation, due to the influence of the Jews, the flower Jews, love in idleness, that kind of love for bottom is kind of a substitutional love for the Indian boy. We can see that in the rather comical scene. Titania keeps supplying what bottom wants. It's like a mother doting or spoiling her child. And then Titania is also a very autonomic woman and a marital trickster. Why do I get the echo? Okay. Titania breaks the natural rule. She is not a obedient wife, and she's not a conventional queen or consort to her husband. She refuses to be naturalized or universalized subordination as a woman in love. And then when she's awakened from the dream, from the infatuation, she doesn't say, "Oh, Oberon, I don't love bottom now. I love you back." No, she just says that I hate these donkey's face, and then she performs some kinds of submission to get Oberon to believe that Oberon has tamed the shrewish queen. But I often wonder that when Titania finds out the Indian boy has been taken by Oberon, then they will begin like the second round, the second cycle of the disharmony. But the 19th century male critics might not agree with me because Titania, in their eyes, is rather a negative or a foolish female character. At least I have some examples here. For example, William McGinn says that Titania is a noble woman wasting her love. And then this is a German critic, I'll just pronounce his name in English, G.G. Gernivus. He argues that Titania is a very vain woman who is only affected by the idea of actual and the visible sin. And then Charles Cowden Clarke, the husband of Mary Cowden Clarke, whose concordance of Shakespeare is also owned by Dickinson. Dickinson has a copy of their concordance in her house. Anyway, this Mr. Charles Cowden Clarke says that Titania is poor little Titania. I was like, what? And her possessiveness of the Indian boy is a feminine waywardness and the sweet humanity, which is even though it is written from a defensive perspective, it also contains a very strong sense of patriarchal patronizing to female characters. And then we have Georg Brandes, George Brandes in English. He calls the Titanian bottom comical rom-com a drollery, and this drollery does not awake sympathy because Oberon's flower juice is some kind of erotic imagination for erotic or pagan love. And then we have this Snider who believes Titania's disobedience is to be punished, even though Oberon's punishment is too horrid as a brute. So we can see that Titania is like beautiful but powerless and even a airhead, according to the male leading criticism in 19th century. But we have two very special women who are not professional scholars, but they have immense knowledge about Shakespeare in 19th century. We know Emily Dickinson, and there's she has a rather infamous contemporary, I would say, Kaiserin Elisabeth von Österreich. I call these two women as die Verwandte Seele. Some of you have some of you have heard about this last year. Die Verwandte Seele is the.
No, it's fine, thank you.
Sorry. Sorry. Okay. The Verwandte Seele means the similar souls, and we can see some coincidence in their poems. To these women writers, Titania is a character of women's uncharted power. Like I said, she is a very underrated queen. And the rewriting of Shakespeare is sometimes a criticism in poems. They convey their perspectives or their readings or understanding of Titania's power in their poetry. The meaning of the criticism or the rewriting of Midsummer Night's Dream is to restore Titania as a character or sovereign of her own. And then the poetry also contained a very audacious aspiration for women's autonomy. I have some. I don't know how much time I've left, so I'll just quickly read through the poems. For Dickinson's poems, I selected 3 poems, so let's just begin. In this poem, I know the place where summer strives is a direct echo to Oberon's line. I know a place where wild thyme blows. It's a description of the location of Titania's bower. And in this poem, Dickinson depicts Titania as a queen of nature, incarnation of summer, and then Oberon is reincarnated as the practices forced. I have to mention that the name Oberon comes from the Old High German Oberon, and then the name also appears in the French epic and also in King Arthur legends. And these origins, compared to Titania's southern and Greco-Roman origin, is rather cold and kind of unfeeling to me. So I would locate Oberon in this poem as the frost. And the lap of the adamant is Titania's own, because the soft refrain symbolizes the lullaby that Titania orders the fairies to sing for her when Titania has audaciously and sternly vows to keep the Indian boy. So because of her insistence of keeping the Indian boy, her heart misgiving her, because Titania is indeed worrying about the disharmony or disorder in the nature. Okay, and the second one is Enchantress, I would call. The poem "The Last Summer is Delight." In this poem, Dickinson re-evokes Titania's Ovidian origin as Circe or Circe, and she rewrites the male-centric romance of Titanian bottom drollery into an ecstasy under Titania's control. Dickinson notes there's a boomerang effect in the Titania bottom comedy because in the forest, especially in the floral bower, Titania is the host and she is in control, and Bottom is the prisoner in the forest. And Bottom will not have a chance to leave or say escape unless Titania is awakened from her infatuation. So Titania's power and her fairy are rewritten into the Enchanted Syndicate. And then Titania is rather a pagan delight in this poem. And then, like I said, when Bottom returns to the human world, he's fantasy or ecstasy is to be deterred, that is to be think of and to be scared of when he rethinks what happens in the forest in his bottomless dream. And a delight, Dickinson notes, a nameless as it is a rewriting of Bottom's dream that, to quote Bottom, no tongue to conceive and nor his heart to report. And then in this poem, the moon is distant from the sea, Dickinson again rewrites Titania as the moon goddess, and then she represents Titania as a trickster, like Dickinson has done to in the poems. I don't recall the title. Anyway, there's a trickster in Dickinson's poem, which is a revision of Rosalind in And So Like It, and Dickinson reapplies the writing technique again in The Moon is Distant from the Sea. Titania in this poem, it becomes the moon goddess, and the moon plays the lover and leads the docile sea, and we can see the docile sea as the Indian boy or Bottom, who indeed have come far from the original land to Titania's land. And this moon, this goddess figure has a performance of love and submission. We can see in the third stanza, the tone suddenly changes into some kind of area, say, "Oh, Signor, thy the ember hand." It symbolizes Titania's performance of submission upon her awakening in Shakespeare's text. That obedient to the least command maintains her autonomy from the imposition of the Signor. I would argue the Signor represents three characters: Oberon, her husband, and Bottom, whom she falls in love in the first sight, but it's not true. And the Signor also represents patriarchy that, to quote Cara Ann Neely, that misuses Titania as a woman. And then Titania also has the shrewishness, like Kate in Taming, in this performance of submission.
Irene, this is wonderful. Yes? So this was about 15 minutes now. So
oh, really?
Maybe you could. I'm really excited to hear the next part. So maybe if we could. Thank you.
So I would just wrap up. So I would just use the first poem of Kaiserin Elisabeth as an example of her rewriting as Titania. In this poem, what's overhyped means what Oberon is about to do. Elisabeth proposes Titania's separation with Oberon due to their marital disharmony is a decent option because Oberon has no right to be angry as he is with the caprices he assumes Titania should have. So the forswearing of his bed and company is a decent separation that serves better than the constant disharmony. There's a kind of a story of this poem. We can do a little discussion in QA session if we have any time later, and I think I would better wrap up now and give the time back to the next presenter.
Thank you so much, Irene, and sorry for it's just because we've got a few other presenters, but I'm sure there are going to be questions for you later on. So, but thank you for a wonderful presentation. I learned so much about those specific poems, and I thought that the links that you made between Shakespeare and Dickinson were excellent. And Sissy, I think, is the kind of name of that particular other figure. So be interested to hear about that as well. Okay, so we're going to move to our next speaker, Hsin-Hsien Wu. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, yes. Let me just share my PowerPoint. Okay. Switch. Okay, so can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon from Taiwan. Thank you very much for being here today. My presentation is entitled Emily Dickinson and Poetics of Cleaning, and this presentation, the content of it is actually part of my PhD dissertation. So I'm still working on some of the ideas. So I'm happy to listen to some suggestions. So, this topic actually comes from a question that what it means to clean Dickinson, to clean like Dickinson's text, and what is really meaning, like how Dickinson think about the cleaning itself. So when we think about cleaning, we usually imagine the removal of the dirt or disorder. Cleaning is often associated with the purification, order, and the completion. But Dickinson, however, repeatedly invites us to think otherwise. So as we all know, Dickinson complains a lot in many of her letters, like how bad cleaning and housekeeping interrupt her time to write. So her letters reveals an uneasy relationship with the household labor. She once in like one of the letters joked, I don't see much of Irene. She's mostly dusting stairs. Or elsewhere in another poem, another letters, she confessed as well, like, God keep me from what they called households. So these remarks suggested that cleaning occupied an important yet deeply ambivalent place in her daily life. So rather than treating cleaning simply as a domestic work, I would like to argue that the Dickinson transforms the language of the domestic labor into a poetic and a philosophical practice. So drawing on the ways of studies, I would like to also propose to what I call the literary cleaning to see that Dickinson's poetry actually does not pursue the perfect order. Instead, her poems continually negotiate with the residue, incompleteness, and material persistence. Okay, so to understand why cleaning matters in Dickinson's poetry, I turn to ways of studies. So in ways of studies, the cleaning is actually a practice of ordering and value determining. So ways is actually produced through the act of the categorization. So we have Mary Douglas that famously defines the dirt as the matter out of place. Dirt, therefore, is not an inherent quality, but the result of the classification. And Michael Thompson similarly argues that the rubbish emerges through a changing system of the value rather than through material properties. Okay, and we also have like Gay Hawkins extends the argument by suggesting that the ways is a cultural relationship rather than a fixed category. So objects become the ways to be just because we culturally decide that they no longer belong. And we also have a Marco Armiero further argues that the waste should be understood not simply as discarded dead things, but as a social relationships that produce exclusion and inequality. So for him, waste actually shows a practice of the authoring. Like it said here, the production of the waste is connected to the production of the other or the outside and of the us. So, taken together, these scholars suggest that cleaning is never merely about removing dirt or dust. Cleaning always creates distinctions. It determines what should remain and what should disappear, what should be gone. So, in this insight, it becomes especially productive and corresponding, like when reading Dickinson. So, based on these like building on these theories, I would like to propose the three different levels of the cleaning as my reading framework to read Dickinson. And this is actually how Dickinson resists these three types of cleaning. One is the textual cleaning. The second is the poetic cleaning, and the last one, epistemic cleaning. So textual cleaning is that editors clean Dickinson's manuscripts into readable texts through process of the collation, finalization, and standardization. And poetic cleaning is like cleaning mentioned, presented in the language of the poetics. So Dickinson's poems depict various acts of the cleaning. such as the sweeping, and the practice that result not in the restoration of the purity, but in continuous transformation. And lastly, epistemic cleaning, and it's more about the readers, how readers to read Dickinson's poem and try to clarify, try to have the clear meanings out of a text. So the poems, Dickinson's poems actually challenges the human impulse to construct clean, stable meanings through naming, classifying, and interpreting, thereby allowing the non-human agent, the materiality, and the textual variation to remain in a state of the incompleteness. Okay. So first of all, do we look at the textual cleaning? I think Dickinson's poems actually shows a difficulty in having clean copies out of her manuscripts and fascicles. So many of her texts does not circulate in the form of the author, chose to finalize with, but a version through tremendous editorial work. So we have like editors such as Johnson, Franklin, and Miller transformed the manuscripts into readable text by standardizing the punctuation, determining the lineation, and selecting textual variants. So we see different treatments of the variants in multiple editors with the editorial attempt to make Dickinson's manuscripts more readable for modern readers. Yeah. So here also comes to the question of the genre, how we define Dickinson's text as a poem or lyrics. Yeah. Okay. So for this, I would like to use the example of the sacred clauses when you sweep. So you can see how different the manuscripts of this poem from the version that now we have circulated on the market, like in the different editions. So you see the last line is completely different. It's more to the top, but in a different direction. So at this point, actually, we have the Mitchell's article discussing the manuscript criticism. And here he says, he observed that the manuscript school sees that the trace of Dickinson's manuscript has its meaning, its poetic meaning. But however, how do we know it's just about the writing habits of the 19th century? So Mitchell actually would like to remind us that like it says here, being aware that reading a manuscript at the end of the 20th century may not be the same as reading it in the 19th century is an important moral and intellectual exercise. It reminds us of the inaccessibility to the historical. So Dickinson's autograph, the lyrics continue to speak powerfully to the present from past, but they traveled immense distances from a foreign country. And we would do well to accept that their accent are alien from our own. So it's like we're not really like have a clue like how Dickinson, what exactly happening to Dickinson's writing during her time. So we're just like try to interpret. So this is the first level I would like to argue that the Dickinson's writing actually resisted the textual cleaning to make the cleaning itself or the process of the editing like incomplete and there's seemingly like no end to it. So based on the discussion here, what we can think about is like which residues are worth preserving, which are merely the byproducts of the writing process, and does cleaning up the manuscript to actually eliminate the textual noise, or does it erase the work's irreducible material history? So here are the questions that Dickinson left to us and make us to think again and again. Okay. And the next level of the cleaning is the poetic cleaning. So in the same point, that sacred clauses when you sweep, we can observe a different definition of the cleaning. So apart from like how we think about cleaning should be like remove the dust, Dickinson's cleaning in this poem just seems very different. It's like she observed the augustness, the sacredness of the dust and let it lie there. So this poem actually okay, so this poem is actually a meditation on memory and temporality and the ethics of remembrance. It transforms a ordinary domestic task like sweeping into a practice of the ritual. So cleaning, sweeping becomes a ritual of approaching the inner self, and the memory becomes a private chamber, a prayer room, and all intimate inner space, and it's also like a secret interior domain that requires a severance and rather than the mastery. So the point continue to ask us to select a referential broom and do the sweeping silently. So it emphasizes the referential attitude. So sweeping memory becomes a ritualistic encounter with something beyond human capacity, beyond like larger than oneself, and the act of the cleaning memory requires the humility, according to this poem. And this poem also introduced the appearance of the other interlocutors. So it's like when you think back to your memory, this poem is to remind you that the memory is not just only like an activity that you do yourself. It's more like a relational, it's communal. So when you think back, there will be others' voices in it. So revisiting the one's memories summons the voices, the identities, and the presences of the others, for example, like friends or some friends or people that passed away from in the past, or maybe something like that. And it also says that the self is never aligned within the chamber of the memory because countless others continue to inhabit it. Okay, and then the last stanza is, for me, is more a climax of this poem. So this poem just celebrates the sacred dignity of the dust, the unchallenged. The dust is unchallenged, so you cannot really like cleaning out. You have to lie there because there's no way to remove it. Yeah, so there are several symbolic meanings of the dust. It could represent the sedimentation of the time that creates, that adds the layers of the distance, and there's like forgetting, and you cannot really remember something clearly, so your memory becomes vague when you think back to something. And it also preserves the emotional residue, so it's the lingering feeling evoked by an old stuffed or like a forgotten the train tickets long after the original events that faded, is that something like that. And it also means that the passing away of someone, so the deceased whose presence is no longer there. Yeah. So like ashes to ashes, the dust to dust. Yeah. So with the view of waste studies, we can see this poem to actually talking about the status of the August, the dust. So the dust ceased to be merely refused. Instead, it becomes the indispensable residue through which memory requires the depth and the historical texture. Dust embodies the material sentiment left behind by time itself. So dust becomes an indispensable part of the memory, and it also part of the cleaning. Yeah. And this poem also shows the rebellion of things. So things here, dust here, is valued not merely by their utility, how useful they are, but for the histories embedded within them. So dust functions as the material index of temporality. Dust records the duration without the language and preserves the traces that resist the complete interpretation. So for me, I see this poem that embraces the incompleteness as the line says. So the dust covering the memory should therefore not be interpreted as an obstacle preventing access to the past. Actually, it's part of the past itself. And this poem also shows that the challenge of the representation. Like when you think back to your memory, you're making a narrative, but with the dust, with the persistence of the dust, it's somewhat not really like likely or successfully you can make a wonderful narrative. Yeah, so there's always something in between there and interrupts your interpretation. So a lived experience can never be entirely recovered or reproduced, as the memory always retains the residues that resist in interpretation. So this poem actually, for me, talks about an ethics of the remembrance. So the sacred clauses of the memory cannot be entered casually. So it must be approached with the reference, the silence, and the restraint. The dust within that sacred domain deserves respect precisely because it embodies that what cannot be fully recovered, represented, or possessed. So dust becomes not a symbol of a decay, but of the survival, the fragile residue just through which time, the memory, and human existence continue to speak. Yeah. And the last level of the cleaning that Dickinson's poem to resist is epistemic cleaning. So from this point, we also see like how Dickinson challenges the normal concept. Like she poses a challenge of the definition of the ordinary concept. So from here, you see a different version, different meaning of what cleaning and what meant to be cleaning. So it intensifies editors and the readers the enduring effort to make clear the meaning of a text and challenges the attempt to build up the clear, clean aesthetic meanings by naming, categorizing, and interpreting. So the text itself becomes incomplete once the readers just like in their search of the meaning, like reading it and try to figure out what she meant in the text. Yeah. So here comes my conclusion. So first of all, Dickinson actually writes poems that cannot be completely cleaned, while the editors and the readers pursue clarity. Dickinson preserves the multiplicity, and her poems resist cleaning. Second, cleaning in Dickinson's poetry does not eliminate anything. It instead is an epistemological practice that ignites the impulse to clarify and fuels the search of the meaning. Cleaning is a dialogic process of negotiating with the existence and persistence of the waste, of the dust, of the what is remained. And lastly, cleaning transcends the mere elimination of a disorder. It constitutes an ongoing negotiation of the spatial meaning, materiality, and the systematic structure. This dynamic is mirrored in Dickinson's poetry and its complex textual history, which demonstrates that no configuration defined by the perfect completion, perfect cleaning can remain static. Yeah. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Wow, what a wonderful presentation. I mean, Irene's presentation was brilliant. Your presentation was brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm sure you're going to have loads of questions. We're going to keep the questions to the end. So we're moving to our next speaker. So this is, so thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll keep your questions, the questions to the end. So the next speaker is Shruti, Sareen. So whenever you're ready, Shruti.
I'll just share the screen. My topic was Emily Dickinson speaks to neurodivergence. I hope I am able to share the screen successfully.
Yes, you can share the screen. Yes, please share the screen. So just click share. It's down at the bottom.
Yeah, I clicked that.
There you go.
Okay, I'll have to ask you if you can see it. Otherwise, I have sent it to you also.
Okay, I can't see it right now. Maybe you need to double click it. It says
not visible. Okay.
Oh, now you're sharing me. Oh, you're sharing your computer. Oh, there you go.
Can you see it?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Emily Dickinson speaks to neurodivergence. I have begun with, I'll just read it out. In my presentation last year, I wanted to build a case for ED being autistic. I never knew that when I started reading, I would find speculative cases for anorexia nervosa, panic attacks, schizotypy, and whatnot. I tried to turn detective and had tried to make the case for autism with anxiety as a comorbidity and the rest as just anxiety manifestations. Martha Nell-Smith made me realize that many speculations may not be true at all. Yet she said one can always frame it like how autistic people can identify with Dickinson or how she speaks to them. For doing so, I have taken her poetry, letters, and her life as well. Only we know of it clearly without speculative diagnosis. So the second slide shows all the pointers that I'm going to cover: childlike tone, sensitivity, the anxiety, panic attacks, the relationship with food, intense attachments, unconventional boundaries, unconventional choices, lifestyle against normativity, tell all the truth but tell it slant, deep interests, and a preference for routine, phobia of change. Those are the things that I will now be covering. So the first one is childlike tone and desire to remain a child. You can see my screen, right? Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Is the next slide
Yes.
visible?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So in a letter, she writes, I love so to remain a child. It might also be that she did not want to marry. That's why she wanted to remain a child. First meeting with Higginson, he has remarked on her small diminutive appearance. A lot of her poems give her that naively questioning childlike qualities, especially her nature poem. And this childlike persona also helps her critique societal processes like marriage, religion, and so on. I have given 2 examples. Will there really be a morning? Is there such a thing as day? It's actually a serious thing like depression, cleverly disguised as a small child's nature poem. And she shows us it with a small pilgrim asking some sailor, scholar, or wise men from the skies. Then there is another one. I mean, of course, there are many, but they won't frown always. Some sweet day when I forget to tease, they'll recollect how cold I looked and how I just said please. Then they will hasten to the door to call the little child. So this is about an experience of not only being a child in a childlike voice, but also the experience of rejection, which is something that rejection-sensitive dysphoria is something that neurodivergent people are very familiar with. So this definitely strikes a chord. She also had a preference for children. In her later secluded years, she used to dangle sweets and tidbits in baskets. So yeah. The next thing is sensory sensitivity, which is again strongly seen in the nature poems and in poems such as I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. Gardening is a highly sensory activity, colors, touch, smell, sounds. The loose, white, comfortable dress that she wears can also be seen as a sensory preference for, being comfortable and wearing loose clothes. The eye problem that she had later in life, Dr. Henry Willard Williams' diagnosis for that had been hysterical hyperesthesia. Now, hysterical can kind of relate to anxiety, and he later wrote a treatise about young women prone to anxiety who are also prone to this ailment. As there was nothing outwardly visible or wrong with the eye, according to her sister Winnie, so hysterical at that time, it just implied that it has some kind of psychological cause rooted in anxiety. But what is of interest to us is the hyperesthesia, which is an increased sensitivity to touch, pain, and temperature. Some scholars have suggested photophobia. Photophobia would also show a kind of sensory sensitivity. Hyperesthesia also shows a kind of sensory sensitivity. Yeah, neurodivergent sensory sensitivity is quite well known. Then the M dash, the ellipses, dashes, sudden breaks, all that has been ascribed to many things, epilepsy, schizotropy, all that is debunked. However, this fragmented thought style can still suit or fit people with certain conditions well. So people can, find themselves or their thought processes reflected in that kind of writing style. Higginson also, of course, he said she seemed very anxious because of living in an abnormal and unnatural environment. But he also said that her poetic rhythms seem spasmodic. And other critics, such as Gordon, has referred to terms found in her poetry like splinter, swerve, brain within its groove, revolvers, guns, which can... which funerals and brains. I mean, it sounds as if she's trying to refer to something which is happening in her brain. We know that there were periods of depression, for example, 1856 to 1858. There was some terror of 1861. Even at the end in 1886, when she died, the doctor called it nervous prostration or revenge of the nerves, which was just after the onset of that illness was just after the death of Susan and Austen's son, Gilbert. So the only thing I'm trying to point out here is that these sort of things, the anxiety as well as the thing about the brain that she writes, are things that, certain people with certain conditions can find a mirror there. Hirschhorn and Longsworth, they write of 2 panic attacks that she had in her life, panic attack kind of situations. One in 1854, in her letter to Susan, while going to the church service, she mentions that her life was made a victim. She ran, flew, soared as if running from a foe. Some phantom was after her. Still, the phantom remained, even though she tried to be brave as Turks, but she could not defeat him. In 1863, in a letter to her cousin, she writes that when she was alone after Winnie left, she became really scared, as if there is a prowling booger might come inside the house. And even though it was really hot, she shut the doors, windows, kept the gas burning for the light, and it gave her a snarl in the brain which she could not unravel. So, yeah. And funeral in my brain actually ends with a sense of clarity. So that could be that, when a kind of panic attack or when something like that clears up, then you see light through the tunnel. So maybe, then I come to her relationship with Susan. So, of course, there are many. Worship Sue to the grave and beyond, idolatry and reverence, said by Meredith Morris, was ready to forfeit righteousness, said one word from Sue. Austen called their relationship as epistolary intercourse. Emily had many words for Sue: Eden, Cleopatra, Dolly, only woman in the world. She called her love as an endless fire. She has called her intense and torrid noons, has been employed as imagery in her poems. Siren is a very strong term because sirens are known to be bewitching, seductive, insidiously tempting. So Sue for Emily is something like Beatrice for Dante and Stella for Swift. And she even replaced God's name with Sue's in the church service. So I have given more examples. Be Sue while I am Emily. Be next what you have ever been, infinity. To own a Susan of mine own. The soul selects its own society. To misuse Sue is power. Enable other love to die, for love is immortality, nay, it is deity. And another very strong one. I do fear sometimes that I must make a hospital for the hopelessly insane and chain myself up there so I won't injure you. This is from a letter. So autistic sexuality, it's extremely intense, passionate love. It grows through fantasy, intuition, memory, obsession, even without direct contact. It can even go in absentia. This seems similar to Dorothy Tenoff's concept of limerence, which I don't like to use because the word limerence has been used very pejoratively in a very negative sense. But if we don't take the negative associations and we just take the concept as such, then maybe we can actually do something better with it. So anyway, because so much of the communication was through letters, so fantasy, memory, and intuition became very important in their relationship, which is not to say, so I am not saying that she is necessarily neurodivergent, because I am just saying that it can speak to neurodivergent people, because this kind of limerent-like passionate relationship need not only happen because of neurodivergence, it can also happen because their love was illicit, non-normative, so meetings with letters. In this way, she speaks to neurodivergence. Another reason, possible reason, could be for such kind of a relationship normally happens from some kind of a childhood trauma or mother wound, and we know that that was there for Emily, and for she has written things like, I never had a mother. I suppose the mother is one to whom you hurry when you are troubled. I wish I had a father. So in somewhere along the line, she had to take care of her parents' illnesses and their emotional needs, even when she was herself a child, rather than the other way round. She looked to Susan as a mother, which is very ironical because Susan did not have a mother at all. Emily still had a mother, even if she was an absent mother. But Susan, because she believed in the church, managed to find some comfort and solace there, which did not happen for Emily. Emily also tried to find other mother figures throughout her life. I mean, I've just written that, like Norcross aunt Elisabeth Holland, wife of Samuel Bowles, Abaya Root, and a number of her teachers. Okay. Then unconventional choices lifestyle, often against normativity. We know that Emily had lots of unconventional choices. We know that autistic and neurodivergent people also have very unconventional lifestyles. Apart from her sexuality, she also signs herself off as a boy in her letters, and she even used to sign herself off as brother Emily, which shows fluidity of gender and not only of sexuality. She was expected to pay visits to other houses. She hated small talk, the polite talk that she had to perform as a matter of social obligation. So again, she goes against normativity. And of course, the biggest one is going against religion. So in Mount Holyoke, the one who wrote Hope is the Thing with Feathers was the only girl in the no hope category. Extremely independent. She loved the science subjects. She had an insatiable curiosity, which is again another neurodivergent trait. And of course, we all know that she used to frequent her father's library, Amherst College Library. Faith is a fine invention, shows microscopes as being of more practical use than religion. I am on my last 2.5 slides, I will call it, not 3. Yeah. Intense attachments, unconventional boundaries, tell all the, okay. So there are 2 points I've written here. The first point is intense attachments, unconventional boundaries. Social boundaries were a little awry, and she wanted intimate relationships, friendships, which also led to repeated rejections and heartbreak. The terror of 1861 is also perhaps linked with Kate. This is something which I read very recently. I had never heard of it last year. Emily thought that everyone could be shared. She tried to participate in Sue's relationship with Austen. She used to address their letters, and she used to take great pleasure in doing that. She used to treat Susan's children as if they were her own children. So she had that, the sense of boundaries was not as typically conventional as it usually is. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. So both these things have been pointed out. I've taken from a podcast by Julie Brown, Angela Lauria, and Matt Laurie. In tell all the truth, but tell it slant. So how they see it in the podcast is that she has a burning desire to tell the truth, but she cannot tell it because of the circumstances and the time in which she lived. So that burning desire to tell the truth is also something which is very, very neurodivergent. Okay, last couple of points. Deep interest. Autistic people are known for having deep special interests, which they are like really. So for Emily, one was poetry because she wrote 1,800 poems in her life of 55 years. One was Shakespeare. Sue can be taken as another of her strong passions, deep interests, obsessions, whatever. And also death. So I have also given examples of several poems. I think I don't need to say all that as we are short of time and it's a very informed audience. Nature's Only Pharmacy, For Being's Malady. This is the Hour of Lead, Remember If Outlived. So of course, death is very strong theme of Dickinson. So much so that in India, when I was trying to talk about her sexuality in an interview, I was told that she writes about death, grave things like death. How dare you link her with frivolous things like sexuality? Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is preference for routine, phobia of change. So the fact that she was attached, like the move from the house on Pleasant Street was quite difficult for her. And later on also, she had a particular routine, never left, rarely left the house, used to wear the same dress and everything. So she kind of liked the same, sameness, familiarity as over. So that is again something which is sure to find a mirror in autistic people. I am one myself. And I've left it like and more. Like a letter from her cousin states that Emily kept dropping plates and breaking them while washing. Due to motor skills and coordination challenges in autism, balance is not that great. Attention deficit can also result in dropping plates and breaking them while washing. So neurodivergent folks can surely identify with this, that you keep dropping plates and breaking them while washing. She was also known to speak to herself in her seclusion, which is also something that many of us can identify with. And that is the end of it.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much. That was such a brilliant paper. And I seem to be on the screen a few times there, which is not always good. But thank you so much for the paper. I really loved what you were saying about the way in which Dickinson can speak to people who are neurodivergent. And I think you're spot on there. And I think some of the things that you've identified in her life and writings just fit with some of the neurodivergent people that I know in my life. So thank you so much. We're going to move to our final paper. So this is to Ting or Wu, and maybe you could stop sharing me. So I seem to be.
And I try to share a screen right now.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so check. Okay, everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. The topic I'm going to present today is Thingness and Transformation, Absent Loss and Hope in Emily Dickinson's poetry. One day I look at the dictionary. The word theme in an American Dictionary of English Language by Noah Webster. The word thing shows it has never referred to only to physical objects. It has been used to describe events, any substance, living creature, which is animal, and even parts of whole. According to 1884 dictionary, it also carried social meaning. It could express contempt towards a person or object. But it could also be used as a term of honor. This semantic flexibility demonstrates that the thing has always been associated with materiality. It makes it especially relevant to the discussion of mourning and thing theory. Thing theory suggests that a thing is more than just a physical object. A thing can blur the boundary between life and death by giving the ordinary object new emotional and symbolic meaning. In Dickinson's poetry, possessions connected to a person who died no longer function as everyday items. Instead, they reveal the continued presence of someone who is physically absent. Derrida also explained this by arguing that the sign and representation replace the absent presence of a loved one. In the same way, Beer Brown, in Thing Theory, mentioned that we recognize the thingness of objects when its practical function disappears and our relationship with the object changes. Through mourning, ordinary objects become meaningful things that preserve memory and connection. The poem I use related to argument is Hope is a thing with feathers, some things that fly there be. Of nearness to her sounder things, and the thing that never can come back are several. The previous two I talked in my about it in my presentation last year in Taiwan. Today I want to continue to talk about my related to my argument. The point I use for today's presentation is of nearness to her sounder things, and the thing that never can come back are several. Of nearness to her sounder things, the soul have special times. The poem begins the moment of death, when the soul separates from the body. At this point, the person is no longer a complete whole. Dickinson describes the remaining parts of her sundered things. She suggests the body, soul, and the person possession become separated. Before the person dies, this element together create the identity of a living person. After this person passed away, however, the person is fragmented. How can a person be fragmented? It is through the separations that the thingness of a body and the possession emerges. They are no longer simply parts of a person, but become independent things that carry emotion and symbolic meaning. In the second stanza, we can see the body referred to as shapes is buried while the soul departed. The person's belongings are also left behind. Although these objects remind us of death and absence, they also preserve the memory of the person who died. Their continued existence allows the speaker to imagine the connection with the dead. Dickinson also described this transformation through the word distinctness and oddity. She suggests that the death changes the way we perceive the ordinary possessions. The third stanza, we can see, although the body rests in the coffin, the person who passed away is not presented as being confined in the graveyard. Instead, Dickinson imagines her continuing to inhabit the familiar domestic spaces, almost as if she was still alive. The body is described as untarnished, while the mouldering playmates represent a slow process of physical decay. This contrast separates spiritual presence from the body's inevitable deterioration. In the fourth stanza, Dickinson focused on jackets that has been long buttoned in mold. The jacket has survived its owner and become the material reminder of the person who just passed away. Although the world of living and dead are separated, these remaining things serve as a bridge between them. They allow the speaker to imagine that the person who died continued to exist beyond the physical earth. The poem also demonstrates how the mourning ritual transforms the ordinary object into a meaningful things. The preferred things, as we can see on my PowerPoints, can refer to the belongings the person who died once owned. As this person passes away, these objects are no longer theirs. But the graveyard eventually yields them back to a living through memory and remembrance. At the same time, preferred things can also symbolize the years the speaker, the poet, share with a person who passed away. Dickinson transformed time into a thing, something that can be touched, held, and or even stolen. By making the year into things, she gives memory a material presence that survives death. While the grave give back those things, it also returns the shared memory between the living and dead. As a result, the person who died not just defined only by their absence, but continue to exist through memory and imagination. This idea also reinforced by the image of a dead saluting with their wings, which suggests that the soul continues to exist even the body decays. In this way, things blur the boundary between life and death, as well as time and space. Denning Wardrop arguing Emily Dickinson and the labor of closing that when a person passes away, the things of her material existence no longer belong to her since she is incorporeal. Dickinson also developed the same idea, like in Perhaps They Do Not Go So Far, when she imagined the dead as having simply removed her corporeal clothes. Rather than disappearing completely, they are freed from physical body and remain spiritually close to us. Because her sundered things still lingered earthly dimension, they become powerful symbols, carry profound emotions, and even create more interpretation that exceeds the original meaning. This kind of role reversed view of mourning also appear in the next word I choose. The thing that never can come back are several. In this point, Dickinson used sing to rethink loss and death in a non-conventional way. Dickinson write her poems on the back of her recipe, but these poems were written in an 1881 letter to Elisabeth Holland after sudden death of her husband, Mr. Holland. A poem served as a comfort. The things that never can come back are several: childhood, some form of hope, and the dead. Dickinson begins by listing things that never come back, never return, like childhood, hope, and the dead. By calling them things, she transformed the seemingly losses into something more flexible and open to imagination. Rather than treating death as a final separation or spiritual stairway to heaven. Dickinson imagined the dead as traveler or settler who have simply departed on a journey. This changes our understanding of death from a permanent ending to a temporary physical departure. By enlarging the geographical map in the poem, Dickinson described the separation between the dead and living not as a spiritual departure, but as a physical separation. She imagined a route that the person who died might take, unlike the route taken in the traditional mourning, which signify one union with God. The poem also expands the meaning of here. Instead of referring to one fixed location, here become multiple heres, suggesting that the person who died may exist somewhere beyond our current understanding of time and space. As Deadman argue, heres may contain future places where the dead may be both absent from us and present everywhere. Elisabeth Petrona also mentioned the living and dead can reverse the role assigned land by mourning ritual. Through the concept of thingness, Dickinson transformed loss into movement. Childhood, hope, and even the dead are no longer completely gone. Like travelers, settlers, they continue their journey and remain part of our imagination. Eventually, Dickinson replaces the rigid finality of death with image of voyage. Instead of mourning those who lost forever, gone forever, Dickinson encouraged us imagine continue their journey. They just continue their journey, and she make the death appear less like ending, more like departure. This is all my presentation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. That's another wonderful presentation. I mean, one of the things that I think brings all of these together is the idea of this non-conventional way of thinking that Dickinson has in her writings, and the way in which she's transforming things around her, life experiences, the book she reads, the text she reads, into something extraordinary. And that's why we call this panel Transformations. So I would love if we had maybe some questions. Our next panel doesn't begin until 11:25 my time, which is maybe 5:25 your time. Martinelle.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you, all four participants. These were such fantastic papers. I can't stress that enough. And they have me thinking I'm going to want to write each one of you to give you feedback separate from what I can do now. But I just want to thank you so much. Each paper was so stimulating in different ways. And I said to Páraic, privately, that I was very impressed with the range of engagement of each one of you with Dickinson text and also with Dickinson criticism without getting boxed in. I didn't say this part to Páraic, but without getting boxed in by any one view. Because of course we are dealing with the poet of possibility. And so I will simply say, I think we need to embrace that capaciousness always. There's no definitive in editing. That's absurd. That's a 19th century term. And there's no definitive in interpreting the poems. And that we can embrace that and come together from all over the world and celebrate that makes me so happy at 6:11 a.m. in my morning. So thank you to each one of you.
Thank you so much, Martinelle. And we will send you the email addresses of our 4 speakers. Henry and I will send you the email addresses so you'll be able to send them some feedback. Would anybody else like to ask or make some comments or ask some questions for our speakers? Samantha.
Hi. Thank you everyone for really stimulating and interesting presentations. The first thing that I actually have 2 questions. The first question is for Hsin-Hsien Wu. At one point in your talk, you mentioned something about dust to dust, and you talked a little bit about that, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more, because I'm thinking about death in my own talk in a few minutes, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I know that she does have a poem where she's talking about the dust in like a church aisle, and she talks about how it's very heavy. I think it's called I Heard an Organ Talk Sometimes. I'm forgetting the exact title of the poem. But I was wondering if you had read that poem and if you had any comments for us on that. Thanks. Is he there?
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, I'm not really sure how I could interpret the word dust in Dickinson's poem, especially. So it's just like come to me a very spontaneous idea that I don't know. Actually, for this point, I just see like how she discussed we as a normal person, how we think about memory. And for me, it's quite relatable for me. It's like a very ordinary task to clean and to think back. And for me, it's quite surprised that I see she connect such kind of a ordinary domestic labor like work with the like so sacred, so much like something that you should respect. Yeah. So in terms of the aspects of the respecting, I think yeah, maybe it could make more sense if we interpret the dust as someone like a death, and so to death we have to show more respect. Yeah, so that's why I also add like maybe dust could also means death. Yeah. So that's so far how I understand this point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
If not, can I ask one more?
So Martinelle has her hand
Irene
up,
is going to ask. Never mind.
And then
Bye.
we can come back. Oh, okay. Yes, please, Martinelle, and then come back, Samantha.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the 4 presenters, you have each given fantastic papers from different perspectives. If you might have questions for each other, or if you can see ways that your papers speak to each other. With the dust poem, I've spent a lot of time in editorial theory, and to clean a poem, I put it in chat, is to also foul it, as in F-O-U-L, is to mess it up. And Dickinson would have been aware of this. The printers was just right down the street. So, and in her house with the lawyers, she would have been very conscious of this kind of rhetoric. And so that, and then Shruti, you did a wonderful job of talking about how Dickinson's poetry, how her writings speak to neurodivergence. And I hope nobody will want to ever clean that up, because that's something I think that's part of Dickinson's possibility and the great way that we expand her circumference. Now, I could go on, but this session isn't about me, it's about y'all. So can y'all think of ways that your papers talk to each other?
Irene, maybe you could start us off, since you were the first speaker.
Yeah, and that's how poets talk to each other.
Okay, I do have a question for Shruti. In your presentation, you mentioned that Dickinson has an obsession to Shakespeare, and you place this obsession to Shakespeare beside Susan. But I want to yes. But Shakespeare was actually quite widely and enthusiastically idolized as some kind of drama god, so to speak, in 19th century. And there's actually a particular word, bawdollatry, means idolatry of the bard. And not only Dickinson, but also like Elisabeth in my presentation, and then George Sand, the French female writer, and also the female idol of both Dickinson and Elisabeth, drawing this idolatry of Shakespeare. So how do you define this Dickinson's obsession to Shakespeare as a proof of her autism?
Okay. I am see, it's not as if only autistic people can have deep interests. I mean, there are the people who have deep interests. That's just one facet. So I was just saying that is something that autistic people can kind of find a mirror in and identify with, because every trait of autism is not as if it's only there in autistic people and not there in anyone else. These traits are kind of spread throughout the population. It depends on the extent to which it is present in a person before they are actually diagnosed with neurodivergence. So yeah, so others could also have had an equally deep interest in Shakespeare. I mean, Shakespeare is such a known writer that a lot of people in the world would be having very deep interests. I mean, I think I myself have had teachers who've made it their life mission to just study Shakespeare.
Okay, great. So thank you. Does anybody else want to respond to Martinelle's suggestion of talking to each other? I'm conscious of time and I want to give people a little break between sessions, but if anybody else, Thing An, would you like to say anything? Since you were.
Yeah, I think I want to talk with Hsin-Hsien, like your presentations actually really similar to my things, because you just talk about the cleaning, about the printing, and talk about like things. I was wondering like what kind of in your presentation, like the point you use, how you just tackle down the for example, you mentioned about the dust to dust, the things. I just want to mention I ask you about like in your papers, like is this actually like in any engagement to materiality, like a lot, like what kind of degree of engagement you will do like to engage like material study?
Thank you, Carolina, for your question. Well, actually, this point actually is not really about the physical cleaning. So for me, many times the Dickinson's writing is more about that she transferred the language into a poetic form. So like there are also other poems about like sweeping the heart, so that you can like wait for the love or something like that. So apparently the cleaning in her poem is more about like a spiritual cleaning or mental cleaning. So for this poem, the Sacred Closet, I think this one is more emphasizing on the mental cleaning. Yeah. So the dust may not already be like a material itself. For me, that's more about a symbolic. So that's what I said. It's like a symbolic meaning of the dust, that it represents something else. Yeah. So for example, it could mean like time. It could mean like our emotion. It could also means our familial loss. Yeah, our family or other like people who just like. So it could represent death. Yeah, for me. So because the context of this poem is more about memory. So I think Dickinson in this way is imagine a way to clean memory. Yeah. Yes, thank you. I see the point. The boss are in the house. Yeah, that's exactly another point about like spiritual cleaning. Yes. So yes, I'm not sure whether I can like answer your question, but for me, I think that does just it's more about just symbolic. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. We've got one question from Cole. Cole, would you like to ask that question, and then we'll probably stop if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. I just it's sort of a quick follow-up question, and I was wondering on your presentation about cleaning, how much you've interacted with like 19th century American domestic guides, like Sarah Joseph Buell or like the Peabody Sisters. You know, these guides that are very literally talking about cleaning. But also depending on who wrote it, and it does depend, but depending on who wrote it, like talking about that as a hermeneutical mode or a spiritual mode also, like the literal cultivation of a house as you know what I mean? I wonder how much you've interacted with those sorts of domestic guides and whether it factors in.
Oh, yeah, thank you for pointing this out. Well, actually, I would like to really like also talk about the background, but because of the limited time, so I have to cut that out. So actually, Dickinson's actually the time there also like there were so many housework guides that forced women to do the domestic labor. So there's like literary writers, female writers especially, also like there are two voices. One is like people who like advocate that we have to clean, and the cleaning itself is more about like a moral calling. So if you do the good cleaning, you're a good housewife, you are morally good. But there's also another like feminist voices to talking about that we shouldn't let the cleaning make us a slave of the house, something like that. So for me, I also observed this kind of environment during Dickinson's time, but I would like to say Dickinson is always a critical lady. So she seemingly has a different idea, different voices to that voices, to that opinion. Yeah, so that's why I said, like, in the point that sacred closet, there seems something different, like a different mode of cleaning, like different attitude towards cleaning. Cleaning doesn't have to be like perfectly clean. There has to be like, hey, yeah, it should like let's just let the dust lie there. Yeah, and this dust is sacred. Yeah, why not just let the dust there? And it's part of our memory. Yeah, and it's part of the cleaning. Yeah. So yeah, that's the background. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to stop it there now because we need to get on to our next session. But can I just thank the 4 amazing papers that we had? Thank you so much. I learned so much. They connected so well together. I'm so grateful to all of you. I will share your email addresses with Martinelle, who's asked for that. I hope that's okay. And thank you again. So I will stop the recording now.